Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hello, welcome back to Commerce Media Matters. It's 2026, new year, new budgets, new chaos, and we're here for it all, right, Paul?
2026, can you believe it? Mate, I'm barely over the holiday hangover. My brain's somewhere between kids opening millions of presents, the beach, a food coma, and just getting my relax on, and we're back into it. But I'm up and about.
Good to hear.
But we figured it was important not to hit everyone with some heavy, meaty content straight away. Let's ease you into it.
Yeah, let's warm up those gears, hey?
Exactly. So we're kicking off with a bit of a rewind episode, some of the best bits from 2025 and the conversations we reckon will really matter this year even more.
Because last year was huge. We had an unreal lineup. People steering billions in spend, people challenging what commerce media even is.
And even redefining what it can be in the future.
So today we're pulling together the moments that stood out the most, the influences of the media world, if we're calling it.
The heavy hitters of retail media from all around the world. We've got Jason Westcott from WPP, who is an all-round great bloke, setting the scene for just how big commerce and retail media have become. And we've got Gayla Roy from the IAB talking about trust, privacy and governance, all that stuff that we all pretend to fully understand, but she really does, and it's really important stuff.
And then we have all-round retail media brain, Kiri Masters. What a star with that global, very real perspective on how fast this space is shifting. And of course, her arch nemesis, as she likes to call it, Colin Lewis, who spiced things up with his creative hot takes.
So think of this as your warm-up for 2026. We're easing it into you with the ideas from last year that you're going to need to know this year. You'll definitely be stealing these for your decks, your planning, and your arguments in the meeting room for the year ahead. Take a listen. So, Jason, 20 years experience in media, commerce, e-commerce, retail media. You literally wrote the book on this, the 101 guide for the IAB Europe with all the team over there. You know, how have you seen the landscape shift in the most recent years? It's become all the rage. What do you think the key drivers that are, fueling the growth in Europe at the moment, but also globally? And, what can Australia learn from all of that?
Gosh, yeah, it's definitely having a moment. Retail media, commerce media, whatever you want to call it, just so people don't get confused. I tend to use the two interchangeably, even though retail media is more focused on retailers who sell physical products and their retail media propositions, and then commerce, that extends to services and all sorts of other things, but attaching a media business, to that. So just wanted to sort of get that out there up front. The way that I see it, it used to be just a bit of a sideshow, a bit of a kind of specialist division, from a marketing team perspective. I mean, I first started doing this when I was at Hasbro, and I joined Hasbro to do e-commerce. And we were transitioning from a very brick and mortar led selling model to, we need to get better at doing Amazon basically. And everything from e-commerce sort of followed off the back of that.
Yeah.
And then that spawned this very, very interesting, subdivision of marketing. Is it digital shopper marketing? Because we have the shopper marketing, very, very well laid out already, cardboard in stores, gondola ends, freestanding display units, all of this kind of stuff. But those ads in a digital shopper environment is where, this really started to build. And I remember at first, we couldn't even be invoiced for running sponsored ads on Amazon. We had to pay via a credit card. It was only set up for marketplace sellers, not for big vendor accounts like us. So, things have come a very, very long way in like 10 years.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said first up around using commerce media and retail media interchangeably. I mean, we've spent quite a bit of time on this podcast sort of exploring the language and contributed to that, that guide. I think the language is really important because it can get confusing for those out there. I mean, we always refer to commerce media as the broader landscape, like you said, the off-network opportunities, as well as the retailer-specific canvases in store and on their and operated assets. So it was great to see that clarity coming from you two, and we would 100% agree. In that space at the moment, who are the guys that are really moving and shaking over in the UK at the moment?
I think I wrote an article on my LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and it's the article that's got the most attention of anything I've kind of ever put out. I think it was just good timing. It was the right topic. A few industry thought leaders picked up on it, and it started some really great debate in the comments.
You also put an article out about your child, which is actually I noticed got a lot of following too. Let's be sure about that one as well.
Yeah, I cut his hair on his first birthday. So
they got a lot of reaction.
Yeah, the Filipino tradition is you don't cut their hair until the child's 1 year old. It's like for good luck. So yeah, a lot of people enjoyed that, which was nice. But coming back to that point, who's doing it well in the UK? I definitely think Tesco, dunnhumby with their Media Insights platform, doing an incredible job, and they can just offer everything. I mean, this is where brick and mortar retailers, who have an omni-channel offer and have in-store and online, very well connected, can offer things that are over and above and connect all of these dots. So, sponsored ads on their shopping app, linked to promotions, off-site targeting using their first-party data, to showcase brands' products, to get them thinking about it next time they go into the store. They subconsciously then add it to their shopping trolley. And then in-store, digital in-store, but also physical in-store as well. I mean, I saw an example recently through one of our agencies, Essence MediaCom. It was the client was Nestle, and they wrapped a Tesco, not a big store, a convenience store, with a Kit Kat wrap, which is the chocolate brand. And it looked absolutely amazing. And I think the data and insights would have gone into that in relation to the locations of the stores to kind of wrap and where they want to drive more sales and all of these things. So you get that amazing connection, that trifecta between creative media, smart media placement, and data fueling everything, which is amazing.
It's an exciting, very exciting space. You've just said to us then that it was always kind of on the outer, and that retail media, commerce media was something that was done in divisions. And would you say that it's part of a core? Is it part of the core media marketing mix modeling now, or does it need more work to become more of a core offering? Is it a primary channel, and something we're discussing now with all brands? First and foremost, you get it on the table. This is what we're leaning right into.
God, that's a great question, and there's like there isn't really a straight answer.
No. I ask great questions. It's hard to answer.
Hey, Jason, that's his first great question. So yeah, he's pumped.
That's it. Nice one. I think the responsibility lands on all sides for this. At Group M, we put out an annual forecast twice a year. We call it this year, next year. Industry leading paper. So, shout out to Kate, Scott Dawkins and Nidhi Shah and the rest of the team. We put that together. That's my kind of Bible for the year as soon as that comes out. They're showing that retail media forecast for this year to be $176.9 billion. And that's going to make it 15.9% of Group N's forecast on overall media spend globally. So it's not a sideshow anymore. Our global head of commerce, Samantha Bukowski, talks about a lot of our clients now, this share of retail media within their digital marketing mix can go up to like 35 to 36%. So, that's over a third. It's a big slice of the pie.
It's a big piece.
And it can't afford to remain siloed from the rest of the marketing mix. There are some who they'll create a fiefdom, within the agency landscape. A lot of specialized sort of smaller agencies who specialize, they will be employed by an advertiser to run the retail media scope, separately to the rest of media. If those type of models continue, they're going to become unstuck, because it's not 5% share anymore. We're looking at 30+% share.
Yeah, that's also exciting, right? That's exciting from a brand perspective. If the agency's leading in and understanding that this is all part of the mix, it can be a really holistic, really well thought out, considered offering for your customers, your clients, right?
Absolutely, because I mean it's so powerful in the way now that retail and commerce media can offer brand opportunities. It's not just that preconceived lower funnel, just close to purchase and driving a sale. type of media. You know, it's not just a dessert anymore. It's like the full course meal, which is great. And that's why it needs to sit alongside everything else. And it's having a place in everything else as well. We're now connecting retailer first party data to upper funnel channels, connected TV. So, you know, that makes it really interesting.
There's a couple little breadcrumbs you said there. So the guys that were doing it well, breadcrumbs, I was trying to stick with the food theme there. You said the guys that were doing it well seemed to be the ones that were most connected. You used those words. And then, you know, we obviously talked about the mix. And I think, you know, probably that's Group M's role in this, right, is how do you get the right mix? So the guys that are doing it well are the ones that make it easier to do it holistically rather than just a singular channel, right? It's like you're saying, it's 15% of the overall media spend. Would you agree that the guys that are doing it really well and making it easier for you to plan it as part of the mix are going to be the most successful in this retail media space?
Absolutely. That's so important. You know, long gone are the days where you just got a commerce team, you know, working on a retail media campaign, you know, be it Walmart or be it, you know, Sainsbury's in the UK, or maybe like Coles in your market. And, you know, they have no idea, you know, what the broadcast team are putting out there, you know, what's on your billboards for digital out of home. You know, all of these things need to come together, and these teams should be included on the full media schematics and plans that they run. And, you know, they should be looking for those crossover opportunities to really drive that media marketing swell and, you know, capitalize then on the closed loop sales that you can provide with commerce media.
Gay, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Blackers. Thanks, Nick.
So good to have you here. We have been trying to connect in person for weeks, haven't we? It's a joy to have you here today. I really appreciate it.
Easy.
So let's kick off. Gay, you've been in the industry since, I guess, pop-up ads were invented, since, you know, banner ad sizes weren't standard. And fast forward today, we're in an era of consumer privacy, consent, data ethics. And these concepts are all more important than they've ever been before. So how has the conversation around consumer trust evolved? And do you think the industry is keeping pace with the expectations of consumers?
I think it goes in waves. Like if I think back to, as you've pointed out, I'm very old. If I think about to the
That's
early
not what
days
I was referring to.
I'm happy to own.
That was good. That was good already.
I'm
Get
happy
straight
to
in there,
own age
Blackers.
diversity. I'm very pleased to own that one. Because if I think back to when, like every new wave of the internet, there's a certain amount of distrust, discomfort, getting used to things. You know, early days of the internet, no one knew what was going on. So I think it continues to change. You know, there's more connections. So people are going to more websites, more apps, dealing more retailers. So it is hard to understand, you know, where your data's going, who to trust. And that's just the nature of us wanting more as people. So it's like this delicate dance that we keep getting, you know, new devices, new connections, more transactions. And we want that while we're still scared of the, you know, where our data's going, how it's being used. So it's, you know, it's this constant dance to keep up with what consumers expect, needing transparency. And it's interesting in terms of the waves and some of the more brands with longevity and trust, you know, when there is discomfort, definitely shine through. And some of those other newer brands need to do, you know, spend a bit more on establishing their, you know, their connection with consumers.
Awesome. Gay, the IAB plays such a crucial role, and it's been somewhat of a guiding light for a lot of what we do here. And we've been really fortunate to be involved in a number of kind of projects. And, you know, I know that, you know, you bring together so many kind of groups and leaders, News Corp, Nesso, and everyone's kind of adding. And we were actually part of the retail media committee and working on certain kind of projects that add lots of value, and we try to give back as much as we can. Given that we know we were, you know, recently had Jason Westcott from Europe on board and the projects they've been working on, what kind of projects are coming up? And do you find, like off the back of what we just spoke then in regards to data and privacy, are you finding that you're having to lean into more projects such as that to explore those things to be able to inform the industry?
Absolutely. And more, you know, my job in the IAB's role around, you know, data and privacy and the connection with different regulators, you know, has ramped up 1,000%. So we have quite different stakeholders. If I think back to early days of the IAB, it was all just around marketing the industry, please spend more. And now it is really that governance and responsibility piece. So we've got sort of 5 key themes in Australia, and they're not specific to retail media, but they play across. We've got 13 different councils and working groups, so who are all trying to navigate the space.
Quite a few, isn't it? Yeah.
But data and privacy is absolutely number one. Trying to look at the global requirements, but also how they fit into a global world. Like the local and global mix is really tricky for particularly retailers or anyone in the transaction space, because they're likely to have customers from other markets. We've got this wild patchwork of privacy in the States. Europe's completely different. So keeping across all of that is really hard. So data and privacy is our number one theme. We can talk a bit more about that later. Transparency, and that can mean a myriad of different things, but that from a consumer point of view, but also a client point of view. What are people buying? What are they getting? Measurement is just like, that can be there. Yeah, it
Huge.
Just stays there forever. Changes what it means if it's there. Sustainability, which is, a huge one, just making sure that we're being responsible as an industry. And then we've got our last bucket, which is really preparing for the future, which is a bit of a coverall, but AI sits firmly in there. And I know, Paul, you're particularly excited about AI, the industry overall. So that one trying to, that governance piece is going through all of them a lot more than it used to, as we're a $16 billion industry. Like in Australia, it's huge. So
it's huge. It's massive. Yeah.
Look, having just stepped down from my part on the board, Gay, I just wanted to give a shout out to you guys, because as you said, there's 13 different working groups, but I think unlike maybe traditional media industries, it's the pace of rapidity that these groups have to move at, because it's forever changing. And, I, for one, feel like the IAB is more important than ever in helping shepherd all the companies that are and the whole ecosystem, particularly here in Australia, around all these changing environments. I mean, we just ended talking about AI. This is a concept that every single business is grasping with, and it's moving at such a rapid pace. You see China launch DeepSeek, then you see Elon Musk come back with the smartest, agent ever, and all of these things are happening, and they've got real business application, and everyone's looking to you guys. So look, hats off to you for managing with what is a very small staff, and you do a very good job. So a bit of a shout out to the IAB now no longer being a part of it as much as I was before.
The themes are a lot more common across the globe. So we lean very heavily on IAB Europe, IAB UK, the US. So particularly around those government regulations. And we're seeing the US go in a slightly different direction on bits and pieces. So trying to navigate what that means, when you're fairly pinned down, it's really hard to give those answers to people where things will end up. But you've just got to think around, if you are a advertiser or retailer, what's the best thing for your customer base, and go back to that, sort of almost this ethical treatment that suits your brand, obviously while fitting into whatever the local, regulation piece is. But all those, all those big themes. And then we've got our retail media working group, which I think we'll debate what that name means at some point. But, they'll be working on a whole lot of pieces this year. So a big consumer research piece we do each year, trying to understand what's driving consumers to make choices, how they're feeling about data. We do a big retail media state of the nation, so talking to suppliers and agencies around how they're investing, what measurement they're expecting back, just where the industry's going. We're doing a lot more of trying to understand the supplier side of things, who probably haven't been as front and center in these conversations.
Yep.
And then
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll continue to sort of build out sort of knowledge series on different hot topics. But, that group that we've got, it's got 30 different companies in there. It's the hottest ticket in town. Nick, I know you guys have been OGs, so a lot of work will come out of that group this year.
Do you think there's a shift with your working group? Because you just mentioned it there in regards to how you approach retail media, or is it a larger piece of commerce media and retail media? Because that's something that Paul and I debate all the time. We actually opened up the podcast last year with what is this?
Yeah.
And, where do you sit on that, retail media versus commerce media, and who's inside what, who, where?
It's a really tricky one, and it gives us a chance to be philosophers in our, when we're often so transactional in our industry. But look, the trend seems to be, and I know you guys have been sort of on this bandwagon, that commerce is an umbrella term.
Yeah.
We're starting to see, obviously, finance, we've got a range of different players that are close to transaction, but we've also got people in the mix that are, I guess, screen networks that don't necessarily always have transactional.
You're absolutely spot on there.
The stuff that O Media is doing.
Yeah, and it's all really important, but I don't know if eventually the word commerce goes away and it's media again. So, does it eventually break down a bit further?
There's some really interesting things happening with connected screens. There's some really interesting stuff happening outside of what would be deemed to be retail media, where they're taking a network from a large amount of screens and bringing it together and being able to provide new inventory, which is what the exciting part for that space as well. So, I think it's a big conversation we'll continue to have.
Yeah, and then there's sort of, I don't want to call them intermediary, but the ones that are sitting on top of the retailers, like a cash rewards or an afterpay. So there's just so many different layers with different opportunities. But I can imagine from an agency and client point of view, completely confusing. I think to date, the term retail media has been so hot in the Australian market and just implies growth that everyone has wanted to keep that label front and centre. But I'm imagining, much like the US has shifted to commerce, that we will start seeing that shift as well.
Kiri, let's start with your journey. It's fascinating. I love hearing about it. You're an Australian who moved to the States. You founded your own agency. You exited that agency in 2022, and then you've launched the Retail Media Breakfast Club, which I know the title you're wrestling with now with some of the changes. But you're quickly becoming one of the sharpest observers. I think you are a retail media influencer amongst a whole bunch of really smart people. I'd love to learn more about how you got here, if you're generous enough to share that with us.
I think you covered it off, actually, Nick. Well, just as a little bit more context, when I started out and I started my agency, Bobsled Marketing, in 2015, I came from a completely different industry. I was originally in banking. I was working at JP Chase in New York.
Oh, wow.
I didn't come from another agency and start my own. I didn't come from a brand and start consulting. I had really no business starting this company at all. But I had started a little e-commerce business a couple of years ago on the side, and I started selling products on Amazon. And I was like, I actually know more about Amazon than some of my commercial clients at JP Chase. So why don't I just start consulting and leave this corporate job behind? So that's what I did. And because I didn't have any Rolodex or any assets to my name, I started writing about what I was learning, blogging, videos, all the content, marketing tools of the day. And that's how we built our brand at Bobsled, and our reputation was through content. So that's sort of what I grew up on as a business owner, and what I continue to do for the last 10 years really is to have that beginner's mindset. And certainly coming into the world of retail media and learning more about what do things look like on the retailer side, I really have been starting out as a beginner. So kind of keeping that mindset and not being scared to say, hey, I don't understand this, so I'm trying to learn about it. Let me share with you what I'm learning. And a lot of the times I'll put things out there and it'll just start to build a conversation because I haven't captured everything, and there are people with other perspectives. So I think it's actually a really nice way to be building the conversation in the community, is to start out by saying, I don't know everything, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's very humble of you, but I also think it's a really authentic place to start. If you started at kind of almost like a level base of, hey, I don't know anything, but I'm here to learn, you can be welcomed into what you might perceive as to be kind of cliques or groups of people that know more than you. You can learn more from them. It's great. Thank you. That's awesome.
And what I've also found is with retail media or commerce media, we'll get into that later, everyone comes from somewhere else. Yeah. Retail media was only a term that I certainly started hearing in 2020 when Instacart rolled out their self-serve ad platform. Was really when it started to be called that, at least in my experience. So we've got people on the tech side who are moving into this world, and they need to learn about what are the constraints and objectives of the retailers and brands. That's new for them. Even if they're deep from the programmatic tech world, they still need to learn about the nuances of retail, because it is very different to a traditional publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got retailers who know nothing about media.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because I remember our COO, Johan Paulsen, was on the advisory board of CitrusAd. Right back at the start, he wasn't having conversations with me 6-7 years ago about retail media. It was just a platform that did this. So you're right. It's kind of like all this happened and then labels started being applied to it. But it is a big mix, isn't it? You're right. And people have arrived at it. I haven't even thought about it like that.
Yeah, retail media or commerce media, or it's one of the questions we ask a lot of our guests actually, because it's obviously the podcast is called Commerce Media Matters. We have a view. What's your view on terms of commerce media versus retail media and how it all works together?
Well, you guys are clearly smarter than I am naming the show with the correct name from the beginning, because
we got something right.
Might need to be stoking that GoDaddy account and getting some more domains. I think it really comes down to the IAB last week handing out the official definition for the industry. And I recently joined the IAB Commerce Board, so I got a very late look at this definition paper. And it's something that is agonized over to be as inclusive as possible, but also specific. It's a very difficult job to define an industry and a category and not entered into lightly. So I think it is important to look at, how they've defined it. I was sort of expecting a little bit more resistance from the retailers, to be honest, because I don't know, I thought maybe they would consider it more of a zero-sum game, like $1 spent on commerce media is $1 that I'm not getting as a retailer. I've spoken with retail media folks and people who've been on that side in prior roles, and generally they're very welcoming, and there's a sense that a rising tide lifts all ships, and they bring something a little different to the table. They might not have the actual SKU level transaction data at the end of the day, but most people seem to believe that more players coming into the space and bringing more attention is a good thing.
So, we've got a big one today. Welcome, Colin. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for calling me a big one. That's not something that's used every day.
We're off to a great start. So, Colin, your name's already been floating around our podcast. We actually had Kiri Masters on just previously, and naturally your name came up, particularly because I was witness to your amazing debate in Cannes this year, which I thought was one of the best events of the whole thing. There was a lot of banter flying around in that pub. Did you enjoy that session?
Well, the slight problem is I came up with the idea in the first place, which was I had this idea noodling in my head, let's do a thing in Cannes, let's have a debate. Let's call it the celebrity death match, which is kind of showing my age because I remember the whole MTV thing. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And of course, my fellow Australian, Kiri, then proceeded to slaughter me on the stage. And, it was a bad idea from my personal sort of ego perspective, but a great idea for the audience.
Well, I thought you did a fantastic job. It was clear that you were playing the black hat a couple of times, but the banter was good and it was very entertaining. It wasn't that sort of normal, boring thing. And you covered some really good stuff. Like we spoke about where's the creativity in retail media for the advertiser. We spoke about return on an investment. Some big themes. Any comments on any of those?
Well, one thing I would say is in general, a lot of retail media stuff is kind of boring, and it doesn't need to be boring. You can still talk about these interesting topics and not be boring. And panels are the worst offender, where everybody has to agree and say, "Oh, Nick and Paul, you're so right." And let me just follow. Forget that. That doesn't help people in terms of learning and understanding. It actually doesn't move anything along. So the one thing you touched on there, Paul, which is creativity. And what I mean when I say talking about creativity, I don't mean, hey, did an amazing ad and it won an award in Cannes. That's not what I'm referring to at all. But unfortunately, the word creativity is kind of trapped into that, if you will, and it's kind of regarded as a thing for the special ones, if you will. And I'm not referring to that at all. What I'm referring to when I talk about creativity in retail media is creativity in terms of an approach, creativity in terms of thinking through how you could structure and hire for your retail media network, Creativity in terms of your propositions in your market, but also creativity in terms of the actual sort of communications, the advertisements that you're using. And that whole world has actually been addressed elsewhere through a lot of work actually that came from Australia around marketing effectiveness and creativity effectiveness. And my sort of entreaty to retail media in the world is to say, let's go bring some of this other good stuff that people have learned and apply it to it rather than just kind of cut and paste. Part of the reason I say this is, as a sinner in this department as well, used to take my Facebook advertisements and all my other digital print ads and try and make them work in digital display. And of course, they didn't work. So my final point is retail media is an entity of its own. It's its own language. It's its own channel. It's its own thing. So I encourage everybody here listening to go and think about the world of retail media through the lens of creativity in an execution sense.
What you're saying, Colin, if I understand this correctly, is there's a lacking of creativity across the whole retail media ecosystem.
Well, I wouldn't be so crass as to go and say that everybody is lacking in creativity. What I will say is that I've seen innovation everywhere, and literally innovation everywhere. So I've got two themes in what I talk about with people. Is like innovation can come from anywhere, and please apply creativity. But I also like to apply creativity in terms of being an open-minded person, which leads me back to my first point, which is innovation. So when I talk about some of the amazing things I've seen around the world, let me give you an example. I've just come earlier in May, before I went to Cannes. I went to Belgrade in Serbia, and I saw the most innovative indoor and outdoor screens applicable in a retail media business that I've seen in the world. And last year, same thing. Saw some incredible stuff in Chile, in Santiago. But we tend to look to the US, and I'm like, no, innovation everywhere, creativity everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Paul and I have discussed how impressed we are when we see a level of creativity come into the screens for an indoor and outdoor, and we've seen a lot of that recently. I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want to be the panel guy where we're agreeing all the time. I know you like being pushed. I'll give it a whirl. I think, as I said, you have to bring in some different thinking, so you're not just putting a dollar discount ad on top of a screen. You've got the opportunity for a moving image, and you've got an audience, and you've got an environment. There's so much that you can do there, right?
Well, the way I put it is, I don't think people have worked out that it's a different context and it's a different channel in the store. The conversations I'm hearing is it's just digital out of home applied. So it's kind of like, coming from one kind of part of the industry, which is looking at the world through the lens of JC Deco or Clear Channel. And I'm like, no, this is a new thing. It's a new vernacular, if you will. And the part of the problem, and I'm going to start kind of lobbing sort of grenades, if you will, here, is that marketing and brand teams are snobbish about retail media. They think it's a performance-based media, and they've been kind of brainwashed into thinking that the only thing that matters is broad reach and 30-second TV commercials and maybe outdoor. And anything that is in-store is, if you will, below the line. And there's a little bit of snobbishness and stroke sort of hierarchy incentives in there as well, which is like, well, why would I get myself involved in fumbling in the greasy till, as Yeats says in his poem, because that would be a different team. But in fact, retail media is its own language, and screens are its own language. And I'd say the stuff that is going to happen for in-store screens is going to be as good as anything we see in Cannes for outdoor. It's just people haven't recognized that. They don't have the language in their head for that.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho, Meg Lirsch, and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.